I'm just going to put it out there. Being the smartest person in the room can make you a target. This is one of the most disorienting professional experiences a high performer can have, because everything you were told about building a career, work hard, develop your expertise, become the person who knows the most and delivers the best, turns out to have a shadow side. You're bright, you're articulate, and you have your job for a reason. Maybe you have a specific education, or you have years of experience, or you're an expert in your field. You've done the work. You understand the problem at a level most people around you haven't reached yet. And instead of that being an asset, instead of your contributions being welcomed, being trusted, being valued, something else happens. The more clearly you can see answers, the more capable and prepared and excellent you are, the more threatening you can become to the people around you who can't keep up. I want to talk about that today, because this pattern is more common than most professionals realize. And right now, in an economy where layoffs are reshaping entire industries, where overqualified professionals are taking whatever role is available, and the gap between what you're capable of and what your environment will allow is wider than it's ever been. This dynamic is playing out in workplaces at every level. From the senior executive being quietly managed out by a threatened supervisor, to the engineer with 20 years of experience navigating a role that was too small and never really meant for someone with those capabilities, to an associate dean who spent months trying to figure out why her co-lead was systematically exclusionary the moment real work needed to happen. The answer in every case was the same. It wasn't about performance. It wasn't about fit. It wasn't about anything they had done wrong. It was about what they represented to the people who felt diminished by their presence. And the question I want to answer today is this: if you can't change how threatened someone feels by your intelligence, what do you do with it instead? That question has an answer, and it starts with understanding something important. Where you spend your intelligence matters just as much as how much of it you have. Today, we're talking about your intelligence spend and the 3 responses that will help you stop investing your best thinking in people and situations that will never give you a return on it. I'm Christina Holloway. For over 25 years, I've coached senior leaders at organizations like Google, GE, and Spotify to architect their authority and navigate the high-stakes politics of the Fortune 500. On this channel, I show you how to recognize the power plays hiding in plain sight, and how to communicate with the presence that demands a seat at the table. And I've been through this too. Sometimes we can come across as intimidating and overqualified for the work, even though we're genuinely coming from a place of curiosity. All right, so let's get started. Let me tell you about a client of mine. She's an associate dean at a university, sharp, organized, deeply committed to her students and her program. She co-leads her department with another associate dean, and for months, she came to our sessions with the same frustration, and she couldn't quite put a finger on it. Her co-lead was a pleasant enough person, but she really wasn't interested in participating in this whole co-lead arrangement. And then the work would start. Missed deadlines, incomplete deliverables, important emails sent without my client's name on them, decisions made in conversations my client was never invited to join. And when my client would find out through her own network, she would do what she thought was right. She would insert herself back in, figure out what was missing, suggest a resolution, clean it up. She did this for months. This is how they would co-lead. So, of course, she was carrying a heavier load. Of course, it was starting to wear on her. And of course, her doctor told her the stress was affecting her health. He told her she needed to find a better way to work. And when she brought that to our session, I took it seriously and wouldn't let it go, because I've been through that. And physically, her body was giving her a warning. Something was wrong, and working harder was making it worse. So we slowed down and looked at what was actually happening underneath the behavior: the missed deadlines, the excluded emails, the co-lead who was collegial in social settings and systematically obstructive the moment real decisions needed to be made. When we took a closer look, we were facing a hard truth. She told me, I didn't realize she was working against me. I thought it was just her personality. So a realization like that, the moment a professional stops explaining away a pattern and starts seeing it clearly, is one of the most significant shifts a person can make in coaching, because until you can name what's actually happening, you have no ability to respond to it strategically. You're just reacting or absorbing or exhausting yourself trying to fix something that just could not be fixed by working harder. Here's what we found underneath the behavior. Her co-lead resented her, and the resentment had a specific source. My client was better at the job. She had more seniority. She had an advanced degree, and she was more committed to the program's success. In fact, all the other associate deans had their advanced degrees as well, but this co-lead did not. Now, I've created a video about what to do if you're managing people who are much more experienced or much more educated than you. But in this situation, all the qualified people in this group were happy to work with this co-lead. She just always felt out of place, and she behaved in a passive-aggressive manner. And here's the thing. Threatened people, in my experience, almost never respond by raising their own performance. They respond by trying to lower yours. The excluded emails, the incomplete deliverables handed back as finished work, the weaponized incompetence, having a political ally keep watching. None of it was accidental or personality driven. It was a systematic effort to bring my client down to their level of low effort and mediocre standards. And my client, because she was excellent and because she cared, had been spending her best thinking trying to solve this problem from the wrong direction, because she was too busy doing the work of two people to step back and ask why. We addressed that with this framework. Once my client understood what was actually happening, a lot shifted. So not about her co-lead, about her and her approach, specifically about where her intelligence was going. She was one of the most capable professionals I had coached in years, and I loved talking to her. Sharp thinking, clear judgment, genuine commitment to her students and her program. And almost all of that capability was being spent in problem-solving mode. Every time she inserted herself back into a conversation she had been excluded from, she was spending her intelligence. Every time she cleaned up an incomplete deliverable that wasn't hers to finish, she was spending her intelligence. Every time she spent mental and emotional energy trying to decode the co-lead's behavior or manage the political ally's influence, she was spending her intelligence. And she was getting nothing back for it. It was intended to distract her and keep her off balance. That is what I call the intelligence spend. The question isn't how smart you are. It isn't how hard you work or how much you know or how clearly you can see what needs to happen. The question is where your intelligence is going and whether the people and situations receiving it are giving you anything in return. My client's intelligence was going to people who resented her for having it, and that investment was producing exactly the return you'd expect. Exhaustion, exclusion, a doctor telling her her health was paying the price. So we addressed it, and we centered it on 3 ways she needed to respond to what was happening around her. The first response is redirect. This is hard because it is about pattern disruption. I told my client to stop inserting herself, stop cleaning up the incompetent work, stop spending energy on people and situations that were designed to consume it without producing anything. This was genuinely difficult for her. She told me it felt awful. She said it went against everything she believed about being a good colleague and a committed professional. She was in fixer mode. I told her that was exactly how she was supposed to feel, uncomfortable. Changing habits and behaviors is not easy, and the discomfort she felt was the cost of redirecting intelligence that had been misdirected for a long time. A few weeks later, a platform outage hit the university, and it required immediate, decisive action. My client handled her programs within hours. She communicated with her students, made alternative arrangements, and resolved the situation cleanly. Kept leadership up to speed, standard stuff actually. Her co-lead did not respond in a timely manner. Students were affected. The situation remained unresolved far longer than it should have. And for the first time, the gap between these two approaches was visible to some pretty important department heads. That is what redirected intelligence produces: visible excellence in the moments that matter, because you stopped absorbing someone else's dysfunction long enough for your own performance to speak clearly. The second response is protect. Redirecting your intelligence is about where your energy goes. Protecting it is about who gets to see it. It turns out my client had supporters. There were people in her network who noticed the pattern, who kept her informed, who believed in her work. And she had something even more valuable: a connection to someone with the ear of the incoming dean. This was important because up to this point, I thought she was on her own. So we stopped treating that connection as a source of information, and we started treating it as a strategic channel. My client began communicating her vision for the department's future through that relationship, right? She was building a case, less against her co-lead, but more for herself, for her vision, for the future she wanted to be part of building. There is a meaningful difference between defending your position and positioning yourself for what's next, right? My client had been doing the first one for months. We shifted her entirely to the second one. She also stopped performing for the people working against her. So this sounds obvious, but it's surprisingly hard to do in practice. When someone is undermining you, the instinct is to prove them wrong, to work harder, deliver more visibly, make the case for your own value in direct response to their attacks. That instinct costs you because it keeps your attention on the threat rather than the opportunity. And it signals to the people watching that you are reactive rather than strategic. My client started saying something when colleagues told her she had been left off an important email. She said she was fine with it, and then she moved on. Those 4 words, "I'm fine with it," communicated something her co-lead had not anticipated: that the exclusion had stopped working, that my client had somewhere better to put her attention, that she was no longer available to be destabilized by behavior designed to destabilize her. The third response is decide. This is the one most professionals resist the longest, and the one that ultimately matters the most. At some point in coaching engagements that involve this dynamic, I ask my client a version of the same question: is this environment worth your intelligence? Yeah, your intelligence, the specific, finite, irreplaceable cognitive and emotional resource that you bring to work every day. Is this environment giving you a return on that investment? That question is intended to give you a plan. Your career is not your job. You have a job, but it's only one element of a career that you get to build for yourself. And the more you have a plan for your career, the more you can answer these questions with confidence. For my client, she said she had approximately 5 years left before retirement. And for you, it might be something else. You want to be promoted in those 5 years, or leading a bigger team, or responsible for complex initiatives. Once you figure out your timeline, it's easier to step back and say, hey, this setup isn't working for me anymore. Or I think it's finally time I made my next move. That answer is going to give you everything you need to make every subsequent decision clearly. Your strategy, your backup plan if the environment becomes unsustainable, your boundary around how much of yourself you're willing to spend on people who will never value what you bring. When you know what your intelligence is worth and what you actually want to spend it on, the decision about where to invest it becomes much simpler. So my client recently told me, you were right. I finally saw this co-lead clearly this week. She used weaponized incompetence. She handed back work she knew was catastrophically wrong and presented it as her best effort, thinking I would clean it up. and I just let it be wrong. That sentence is so hard, but one of the most sophisticated things a high performer can learn to say, because the instinct of every capable, principled professional in that moment is to fix it, to step in, to make it right, because the work matters, the output matters, the excellence matters, and someone has to care enough to close that gap. And that instinct, however honorable, is exactly how you waste your intelligence. When you fix someone else's catastrophically wrong work, you do three things simultaneously. You spend your intelligence on a return that will never come. You make their failure invisible by absorbing it into your excellence, and you signal to them and to everyone watching that their dysfunction has a safety net with your name on it. My client let it be wrong. The work sat there, incorrect and inadequate, visible to the people who needed to see it, because this was a presentation and that co-lead had to present her own slides, and they were wrong. And she needed to defend why she provided wrong slides. We all want excellence. But don't let your excellence or high standards compensate for someone else's inadequate effort. That same week, she had an intentional conversation through her strategic friend. She shared her vision for the program, where it needed to go, what success would look like under new leadership, how her half of the department was positioned to contribute to that vision immediately. She wasn't defending herself, and she wasn't making a case against her co-lead. That's very important. She was simply being the most prepared, most forward-thinking, most strategically clear person in the conversation, which is exactly what she has always been. And finally, spending that clarity on someone who was in a position to value it. That is the intelligence spend working as it should. My client is walking into conversations with something she didn't have 6 months ago: clarity about what she wants, a strategy for how to get it, and the energy to pursue it, because she stopped spending that energy on people who were determined to consume it without giving anything back. That is what redirected intelligence produces. It doesn't just change your career trajectory, it changes your life. I want to leave you with something before we close. The intelligence trap is not about being too smart. There is no such thing. Your capability is not the problem, and it has never been the problem. The trap is spending your intelligence in places that will never give you a return on it, on people who resent you for having it, on situations designed to consume your best thinking without producing anything worth your time, on proving yourself to an audience that has already decided against you. The three responses, redirect, protect, decide, are available to you right now. Ask yourself the question my client finally answered: where is your intelligence going, and is it producing a return? And if the honest answer is that your best thinking has been going to people and situations that will never value it, well, that's not a verdict on your intelligence. That's information about where to spend it next. I'll leave you with this. Early in my career, I sat in a room where I was told in more ways than one that I was too much, too prepared, too capable, too visible. And I had enough sense to eventually stop spending my intelligence trying to prove my value to people who had already decided they didn't want it. That decision changed everything. It can change things for you too. If today's video resonated, if you recognized yourself in my client's story or in the pattern we named today, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me where your intelligence has been going, because naming it out loud is almost always the first step towards spending it somewhere better. My free communication toolkit is linked in the description below. It includes the frameworks we've referenced throughout this video, so you can start applying them before your next high-stakes conversation. I'm Christina Holloway. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.